This video is sponsored by Give Directly. Go to givedirectly.org/stepback to help send direct cash transfers to families in a Kenyan village where we can make an immediate and lasting difference in people's lives. Hey everyone, it's been a minute, huh? Shit's, for lack of a better word, going down in a lot of different ways. In Canada, fights are breaking out over the chance to hand in resumes. The increase in interest rates has made the whole way people did business for the last 15 years come to a screeching halt. That's why every show is getting canceled, every site is shutting down, and prices just keep going up and up and up. One of the things we really haven't reckoned with as a civilization yet is that the COVID pandemic slammed the accelerator of the trends of capitalism into overdrive. I know the metaphor isn't scientifically sound, but we were like frogs in slowly heating water, not noticing that we were getting to the boiling point. But in the last couple of years, someone cranked that stove onto high heat, and now everyone's looking around going, yo, are we all fucking boiling right now? One of the really good examples of this change in the economy is wealth accumulation. The pandemic saw a truly titanic amount of wealth move upwards to the upper 1, or even 0.1% of society. Global billionaires saw their net worth grow by over $3.6 trillion in 2020 alone. According to Oxfam International, the wealth of the 10 wealthiest men doubled during the coronavirus pandemic. And that money had to come from somewhere. And where do you think it came from? It was you. It came from you. Productivity doesn't necessarily increase those rates. They just stole your money. And that's why everyone is struggling and why governments can't do anything. Doing stuff takes money. And we gave it all to like 10 guys. Now, at the same time, while these billionaires are doubling their net worth, the just-in-time logistics systems that all companies had adapted to that sacrificed resiliency in their supply chains for profitability completely fell apart. It took them years to get back to normal, if they ever even did. But for some reason, the number keeps going up. You would think that economic disruptions and supply chain issues would not be linked to the line going up, but the line keeps going up. Why is that? One way that they make line go up is by juicing the economy for basically whatever value it has left in it. We're seeing an economic phase change, and the rich are using this period to do the economic equivalent of ripping the copper wire out of the walls and selling their stuff on Facebook Marketplace. They came for Red Lobster, and they are coming for you. So of course today what I'm talking about are private equity firms and their wonderful practice of scrapping the economy for parts and replacing it with nothing. This is accelerating us towards this strange endpoint where the fundamental paradox at the heart of our economic system can no longer be ignored. Because heck yeah, you're watching Step Back, baby, and you know what you want, you filthy animals. You want the gritty, grimy details about how our world is economically and politically heading towards a point of no return. And you're gonna like every single second of it. Part 1. The part where I pretend I'm still doing history. Before diving into the seafood-scented dumpster fire that is the Red Lobster saga, let's take a quick trip down memory lane because, spoiler alert, some of the things going on right now are not very new. They're just sort of the same things always happening, getting faster. The rich screwing over everyone for profit is basically capitalism's entire thing. That's what this whole channel tends to be about. But let's go back to the past and maybe sometime like around medieval Europe. You had peasants who were sort of chilling on these common lands and lived a subsistence farming life. It's not glamorous, but at least they have access to land and resources. But then the villains of the age show up, wealthy landowners, and they're like, you know, it'd be fun. What if we just took all of this land for ourselves? And you have something called the enclosure movement. But this wasn't just a land grab, it was like the OG version of wealth extraction. A slow-motion heist that played out over centuries, from the misty days of the 12th century all the way to the smoky industrial era of the 19th. The rich were busy fencing off what used to belong to everyone. But it was between 1750 and 1860 that things really went off the rails. In just over a century, more than 4,000 enclosure bills zipped through Parliament faster than a metaphor for something that goes fast. By the time the dust settled, about 30% of England's lands had gone from ours to mine, or more accurately, theirs. Suddenly, peasants who once had access to land for farming and grazing found themselves with nothing. No land, no resources, no choice, but to lease chunks of their life to survive. It's like if someone came to your house, stole your fridge, and then offered to sell you back your own food. One overpriced bite at a time. Man, this is starting to sound a little familiar, isn't it? And we're not just talking about a few unlucky farmers here. Entire regions were turned upside down. The Midlands saw whole villages vanish. In the southeast, places like Essex and Kent watched their communal patchwork of fields get turned into fenced-off private lands. In Northumberland, the landscape changed faster than you could say, where'd all the sheep go? And all of this is now making me just want to go play Agricola. Give me one moment.
I flooped the pig.
But the peasants didn't take this lying down. From the 1530s to the 1640s, enclosure riots were all the rage. Angry mobs armed with righteous fury and whatever farm tools they could grab. Literal torches and pitchforks. And let's not forget, there were the diggers. In 1649, these plucky rebels decided to fight the power by gardening, which is based as hell, by the way. They took over St. George's Hill in Surrey, trying to turn the enclosed land back into a common vegetable patch. Like Occupy Wall Street, but with turnips. Maybe even like those pinkly purple turnips that you get with shawarma. Sorry, it's lunchtime. But in the end, all of this resistance was like trying to metaphor for a really hard thing to stop. The peasants lost their land, their livelihoods, and for many, their entire way of life. With no other options, they packed their bags and headed to the big cities, swapping fields for factories and becoming the world's first cubicle farmers. And I really want you to imagine what this period was like. Entire villages would empty out, families would trudge along muddy roads carrying basically anything that they could fit on their backs, heading to the promised land. If by promised land you mean overcrowded, polluted, open-air septic tanks. And I'm not just talking about Atlantic City. London, Manchester, Birmingham, Liverpool, these cities swelled like ticks on a lazy dog and inspired an entire different type of board game. By 1851, 2/5 of the UK population was crammed into towns with 10,000 or more people. And by the end of the century, over 70% of England's population was urban. It was like somebody had tipped the whole country onto its side and the rural folks just slid all into the cities. But what were they sliding into? Well, this was a period known as the Industrial Revolution. So your pitchfork would be traded in for basically turning yourself into a human cog in a giant smoke-belching machine. These former peasants found themselves working 12 to 16-hour days in factories that make modern-day sweatshops look like luxury spas. And contrary to popular belief, their peasant life before, which was hard but was quite lovely by comparison. The textile mills of Manchester, the coal mines near Birmingham, the forges of Sheffield. These were the new fields our displaced farmers were tending. Except instead of crops, they were harvesting lung disease, workplace injuries, and paychecks so small.
How small were they?
They were so small that people struggled to afford all of their necessities of life. So that life sucks enough without mentioning also the housing situation. Let's just say it made their old peasant hovels look like 5-star hotels. Families were crammed into back-to-back houses with no running water or even shared toilets. The streets were open sewers and the air was so thick with pollution you could probably chew it. It was like a non-stop fire fest. How old is that reference? But hey, at least they had jobs, right? Well, sort of. These new urban workers found themselves in a system that made their old feudal lords look quite benevolent by comparison. Factory owners could fine workers for minor infractions. They could employ children for a fraction of adult wages, and generally treat their employees like disposable napkins. It was nearly as bad as working in an Amazon fulfillment center, where I learned that Amazon is running into labor issues because they've literally chewed through almost the entire US population. That could actually work for them anyway. God damn, that's dystopian. But of course, just like when enclosure came, these workers didn't take this lying down. One example would be the Luddites, who blamed these new machines, and they smashed them to bits. The Chartists demanded crazy things like voting rights and fair representation. And, let's not forget, a key defining thing of this period, the rise of trade unions fighting for wild ideas like, hey, maybe we shouldn't work people to death, and hey, maybe you should pay us enough so that we can eat occasionally and buy bread that does not have sawdust in it. Man, whatever happened to those unions? But the most significant change was to the very fabric of society itself. The traditional rural culture with its communal practices and shared spaces was shattered. The village green was replaced by the factory floor. Harvest festivals by mind-numbing shift work. And people became atomized, lonely. Nothing more than workers. The great urban to rural migration was brought to you by the enclosure movement and its good buddy, the Industrial Revolution. It set the stage for the modern world as we know and the one we know. But hey, at least we got some cool Dickens novels out of it, right? So yeah, this was the Colonel's original recipe when we talk about wealth extraction. It was a centuries-long process that turned "we're all in this together" into every man for himself, and set the stage for the kind of capitalist shenanigans we're dealing with today. It's almost enough to make you want to go and just go to the country and start your own communal garden. Almost. I tried it once. Squirrels ate all my crops. So let's move over to the United States and talk about the era of the robber barons. You'll like this section because it's a lot like now. Rockefeller, Carnegie, Vanderbilt, names that still echo through the halls of obscene wealth today, were forged in this moment. They were the lucky winners of a game of Monopoly, because Monopoly was literally designed as a critique of precisely the things they did. Let's start with John D. Rockefeller. This guy controlled 90% of oil production in the US at his peak. 90%. And how did he do it? A little thing called predatory pricing. Imagine if your local supermarket started selling everything for 1 penny and drove all the other stores out of business, then jacked up the prices to whatever they wanted. Oh, that's Uber. That's Uber. Then we also have Andrew Carnegie, the steel magnate. Carnegie's idea was vertical integration, which was less about making an efficient business practice and more about creating an inescapable steel trap for the entire industry. He controlled everything from the mines to the mills to the railroads that transported the products. That's Amazon. That's just Amazon. And let's not forget one of the most fun names to pronounce, Cornelius Vanderbilt, the railroad tycoon. He got so big by buying out and consolidating all the competition until he controlled nearly every train in the United States, and that is Microsoft. No, that's everything. Now you might be thinking, but surely these captains of industry created jobs and opportunities for the... No. Bad. They created opportunities the same way that a sweatshop creates opportunities for child labor. Workers in Carnegie's steel plants worked 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week, in conditions that were basically exactly like a modern-day sweatshop. What would happen if workers dared to complain? Well, that's what union busting was for. The Homestead Strike of 1892 saw Carnegie's management hire Wizards of the Coast employees, the Pinkerton Detective Agency, to negotiate with the strikers. And by negotiate, I mean shoot them. The influence of these robber barons extended far beyond their industries. To keep their profit margins, they bought senators like they were on clearance, paid off judges like they were parking tickets, and treated government like it was their own personal vending machines. They used campaign contributions to receive favorable legislation, and that's just every Western country now. The legacy of these robber barons is, as I've kind of heavy-handedly alluded to, fairly strong. Massive corporations, wealth inequality, corporate influence of politics is all sort of the socioeconomic cocktail that these guys mixed up for us. They didn't just change the game, they changed the entire damn casino. So the next time you hear somebody selling free market libertarian capitalism, remember these guys. We tried it. You get sweatshops. and Pinkertons. So you might be thinking, but Tristan, didn't we fix all that robber baron stuff? I think I remember something about union laws, antitrust regulations, trust busting, Teddy Roosevelt, something like that. I think it was during the Jazz period. Well, the thing is that regulating capitalism is sort of like trying to potty train a honey badger. You might think it's cute and fuzzy and might make for a good Instagram post, but at some point you realize you're trying to potty train a honey badger, something that's designed to basically kill you and everyone around you. Here's the thing about capitalism. It kind of just won't die. No matter how often you think you've squashed it, it comes back with a new and improved way to make your life a living hell. Those robber barons of the Gilded Age, they might be dead right now, but their spirit lives on. It's like they downloaded their consciousness into a network of sentient hedge funds before croaking. And now, these algorithms are running the show, except instead of top hats and monocles, our modern day robber barons wear hoodies and Patagonia vests. Today's robber barons are Silicon Valley billionaires, private equity firms, or basically anyone who thinks a yacht isn't truly a yacht unless it has its own mini yacht that goes inside the yacht. Those old Victorian factories have been replaced by, well, more factories, but this time they're packed away in countries with names we can barely pronounce, where workers are paid a pittance to assemble our iPhones or sew our suspiciously cheap t-shirts. Out of sight, out of mind. Meanwhile, back in the good old US of A, factories are being swapped out for service sector jobs, which don't have the hard-won victories of the labor movement to rest on. As government regulations have been stripped back over the last 40-ish years and change, we're seeing aspects of the days of the robber barons come right back. Like even the child labor stuff. So the game, my friend, remains depressingly familiar. Extract as much value as possible, cut costs to the bone, and leave behind a trail of economic and ecological destruction. These corporate vultures aren't just content with squeezing workers dry, they've gone gourmet. They're now devouring entire companies whole, stripping them for their assets, loading them up with debt like a Thanksgiving turkey on steroids, and then leaving them to rot in a bankruptcy graveyard. And that, my lovely step back peeps, is where the real meat of our story begins. Or if you're a vegan, something like the TVP of our story. Because today we are diving headfirst into the festering cesspool of the hot new latest stage capitalism. The part where the economy devours itself and everyone else alive. Part 2. The economic tyrannids. We have established that capitalism has a bit of a history of wealth extraction. It's a fancy term for taking all of our stuff. Shocking, I know. But enough with the history lessons. Private equity firms, the piranhas of the financial world, they're not content with just one little bite. They want to devour the whole damn ocean. Piranhas are a river fish, I'm just realizing now. They're doing it with the surgical precision of a heart surgeon. Instead of saving lives, they're vivisecting whole industries. So, buckle up, Buttercup. This is quite a gory tale. Why would I say buckle up, Buttercup? What was I on when I wrote this? Just to show you how long ago I wrote this script, let's start with Red Lobster. You remember those Cheddar Bay biscuits? Turns out that those bad boys couldn't save the chain from a fate worse than, well, being boiled alive. It's kind of fucked up that we do that, right? In 2014, the company that owned Red Lobster, the one that also owns the culinary masterpiece Olive Garden, decided to sell it off. Enter Golden Gate Capital, a private equity firm with a name so innocent, they have funded at least one genocide. That's a joke. For legal purposes, these folks were more like some kind of financial Freddy Krueger coming for your dreams and your pension funds. I'm assuming that's what that means. I've actually never seen a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, so I have no idea if that joke works at all. Golden Gate swooped in, paid $2.1 billion for the chain, and immediately started playing financial Jenga with the company's assets. Their first move was what's called a sale-leaseback deal. They sold 500 Red Lobster properties for $1.5 billion, and then promptly lease them to Red Lobster. It's like selling your car to a friend and then having to pay them rent to drive it. Now, this kind of deal is actually a private equity specialty. When you're playing with other people's money, making number go up fast is priority number one. A short-term profit bump to impress their investors is all they care about. The long-term health of the company is secondary, if it's even a consideration. The communities that those tasty Cheddar Bay biscuits support, they have zero cares about. As long as those dividends keep flowing like unlimited shrimp, everything's fine. Anyways, the sale-leaseback maneuver meant that Red Lobster now had to pay an extra $200 million a year in rent payments to themselves. So suddenly those biscuits weren't so cheap anymore. On top of that, they started piling on debt to the company, kind of like if you were to order those biscuits but knew that you were lactose intolerant. It's good now, but soon there will be hell to pay. Then, to just really spice things up, they brought in a new CEO whose expertise was in, theme parks? I'm starting to think this plan is going to have consequences. When those profits started to dip, you just dismantle the company, sell off the prime waterfront real estates, and ditch the whole mess like it's a bad Tinder date. They can just file for bankruptcy, get a nice payday, and then fuck off to the next company desperate enough to sell. Now, Red Lobster is not the only victim of private equity shenanigans. This kind of corporate cannibalism is happening everywhere, from Toys R Us to Payless Shoe Source to countless nursing homes. This is the latest in late-stage capitalism. It's the last scene of a zombie movie where the only thing left is a bunch of ravenous, flesh-eating corporations feasting on the final remains of our economy. And everyone's too busy on their dang phones to understand. So anyways, back to Red Lobster, and I swear this is going somewhere important. Golden Gate Capital started to tighten its grip on Red Lobster, and things got even worse. A lot of those restaurants, which were now chronically understaffed, became employee ghost towns. The truth is, during the pandemic, when everyone was saying no one wants to work anymore, it was actually closer to no one wants to hire anymore. Ha! Got 'em. And as these locations started shutting down, we realized that we were building a recipe for disaster, like Vegemite. It's just a disgusting mistake that someone leaves behind and puts a bad taste in everyone's mouth. Get fucked! And Golden Gate acted like a kid in a candy store, grabbing fistfuls of assets and profits and stuffing their pockets anywhere they could, leaving behind this empty, sticky, bankrupt mess. Red Lobster limped on for a bit, but not long. They finally filed for bankruptcy in 2024. It turns out that Endless Shrimp, another scheme to bleed Red Lobster for their last remaining cash, and a mountain of debt doesn't exactly mix well. Shocking, right? Well, how about Toys R Us, the magical land where kids' dreams come true? Private equity turned that dream into a nightmare faster than you can say raw sexual magnetism of Jeffrey the Giraffe. Bain Capital, KKR, and Fernando Realty Trust got their greedy little paws on the company in 2005. They did their usual song and dance, they loaded it with debt and they stripped its assets like a Black Friday shopper on a sugar high, and then, surprise surprise, filed for bankruptcy once they had completely drained it dry. And in the end, 33,000 jobs just vanished. But wait! There's more. Remember how I mentioned Payless Shoe Source? Place where you could pay less for a decent pair of shoes? Well, private equity decided that affordable footwear was for suckers and drove that company straight into the ground with basically all of the exact same tricks they did for Toys R Us and Red Lobster. The things that get really nasty is when they not just go for retail, but circle everywhere. Probably some of the most disturbing are places like nursing homes, where they cut staff and lower the quality of care, all the way to ambulance services, where they charge exorbitant fees for basic essentials. Even worse, sometimes they get a hold of private prisons and try to do the exact same thing. And you can imagine in both those cases that results in death. So this private equity process literally makes money. Like they make a profit, the economy goes up, their stock prices go up by destroying jobs, getting rid of parts of the economy, and replacing them with literally nothing. It's enough to make me a very tired husband slash father slash cons monkey slash improv class taker. And it makes me kind of have like a little bit of like a revolutionary feel. And the thing is that the private equity people are working overtime. And in the sort of wake of a lot of companies being disrupted through supply chain disruptions and all the like COVID lockdowns and things like that, they're swooping in on large parts of the modern day economy. And so the reason I wanted to make this video is because this is like the thing that's making the economy look like it's growing. It looks like, you know, the S&P 500 looks great. And so all of the people who look at the stocks and use that as a proxy for the entire economy are ecstatic because they're like, look, the economy is doing great. Things are doing great. But then everybody, you know, who isn't worth 7 digits at a minimum are looking at the fact that they can't afford anything. Everything's doubled, tripled in price. Nobody can afford rent. And now unemployment numbers are going up. But they see on the news that number is going up, so things must be good. That is because basically the economy is literally eating itself. It's a really messed up situation when you have an economy that grows and benefits off of basically deconstructing the like base things that make an economy function. Now the incentive is to unbuild things, to unconstruct businesses and replace them with nothing. There's so little money in like the average person's pockets now that it's not even worth the investment to do anything for you. Jesus Christ. So yeah, this is bad. The closest thing I can think of is that private equity firms act like the Tyranids, objectively the best faction in Warhammer. They're just devouring the economy of all of its biomass. Guess who all of the consequences of these bankruptcies trickle down to? It's us. This is what trickle down means. And the thing is, there's very little that we can do to stop them with the current means. They're masters of tax avoidance. They're hiding billions in offshore accounts, shell corporations, complicated financial schemes. They play by a different set of rules. They live in a very small club, a club that we're not invited to. And the worst part is, they're basically getting away with it. Part 3, the human cost. These private equity firms are basically running a smash and grab on the entire economy. But you know what really grinds my gears? You see all those empty storefronts in your town? You know, the ones that used to be bustling with life, but now just sort of echo with the ghosts of minimum wage past? That's not just about companies going under. When private equity strips these companies, even, you know, not exactly things that we would love, like, you know, Toys R Us or Red Lobster or whatever, it hurts people. Real people. People with families, dreams, anxieties about that rash they have. People who want to know what Skibbity Toilet is. You know? Normal human stuff. This isn't like an abstract economic theory. People are losing their livelihoods. There are folks like the dad who spent 30 years working at a factory that got bought out by a private equity firm. And you want to know what synergy and streamlining looks like in real life? It's that dad getting a pink slip after 3 decades of busting his ass. It's his pension getting gutted. His health insurance evaporating faster than a fart in the wind. And what the hell is he supposed to do at 55? Retrain? You think he's gonna learn fucking Python? Yeah, like he's gonna find a job when companies use algorithms to discriminate against people for their age, education level, name, and vibes. But hey, at least the stock market's doing great. And even bigger than all the people who lose their jobs and their livelihoods as a result of this, there's a ripple effect. What happens to the town when the business closes? They start to wither. They become ghost towns, haunted by the memories of what used to be. They become economic dead zones. So yeah, the human cost of private equity is massive. It's measured in shattered dreams, broken families, and communities left to rot. And you know those depressing YouTube documentaries about like the opioid crisis or the rise of the far right? Well, what do you think is driving that? Why do you think people are depressed and angry? You get the sense that the system is rigged against you and you can do nothing about it. To many folks, that just causes you to shut down or let the yelling TV man tell you that it's the immigrants doing it. But it doesn't stop at one town losing a factory or one family struggling to make ends meet. This shit is systemic. It's designed to fuck everyone but the top 1%. And it's only getting worse. And faster. Every time one of these vulture capitalists swoops in and guts a company, it's like they're punching a hole in the life raft of our economy. Eventually, there won't be enough raft left to keep us afloat. I'm not trying to be a downer here, folks. Well, maybe I am trying to be a downer, but this is the reality we're living in. The economy is designed from its very fundamental nature to screw you. And the worst part is that most people are too busy just trying to fucking survive to even notice. Which, by the way, is another example of how capitalism distracts us from systemic problems. Part 4, systemic enablers. But let's be honest, blaming private equity for this exsanguination of the economy is kind of like blaming the zombies in a zombie movie. They're munching on everyone's brains, but that's just what zombies do, right? You can't blame them for wanting to yum yum on your tum-tum because that's just what they do. And they do it because they can. The real culprits are those who rigged this entire game. They're the people who made all of this shit legal. And this is the real rogues gallery of scumbags. You probably remember them from every video I make complaining about them. Neoliberal politicians, lobbyists, deregulators with a fetish for dismantling anything that might remotely protect regular people. Let's talk about those politicians, those public servants who spend more time fundraising for their next election than, actually doing anything. So let's talk about the politicians. Neoliberalism is literally an ideology that looked back at the robber baron days and was always trying to bring it back. Because the thing is, the robber barons, the laissez-faire, unregulated capitalism led to the Depression. And the only thing that really got out of the Depression was massive government investment and intervention in the economy. And the entire time that was happening, there was always a conservative backlash, a desire to go back to that age, which the ideology of that, unregulated free market capitalism that led to the Depression was called classical liberalism. And then when you get into the sort of days of Keynesian intervention in the economy, you get people who are trying to bring that idea back in what's called neoclassical liberalism, or just shortened into neoliberalism. And due to economic stuff that's really not germane to the topic of this video right now, the Keynesian system started to fall apart in the 1970s, and the ideologues of neoliberalism, who represented a lot of wealthy people and their interests, started to do a lot of consciousness raising and make the point for them, to the point where somebody who professed their ideas in 1964 was considered a insane madman and was not somebody who could even be considered for the presidency. The same ideas were then elected right into office in 1980 with Ronald Reagan, a guy who actually campaigned and did speeches for Barry Goldwater. The idea got normalized, and as that happened, there was this mix of things where the deregulation of the economy was mixed with the basically explosion in computer and information technology that led to a big economic boom, and the two were considered to be connected, although they were not at all. And then that led to several generations of politicians now being ideologically incapable of doing anything about the issues or this process going on. Furthermore, politics has become very much a matter of raising money for elections, which means that many politicians are beholden to the interests of rich people, and also many politicians are rich people themselves, and they have an interest because neoclassical liberalism definitely appeals to their sensibilities. It is an economic system that is designed to move money from everybody else into their pockets, so they have a material benefit to pushing for these kinds of deregulations. And part of that has resulted in massive deregulation, because there's no way to save more money than making things less safe. And deregulation has resulted in a lot of the businesses, either the financial organizations like private equity, able to do things that really should be illegal, but do them anyway, without any sort of legal clapback, or people being able to run businesses in a less safe and more hazardous manner, because a lot of the laws to keep people, workers, and consumers safe have been stripped back over the years. And this isn't even confined to North America. We aren't the only suckers on this menu. It's literally happening everywhere. Because of the freedom for capital to move from country to country, megacorps and private equity have been turned into behemoths that reach across borders and grab whatever they can. Remember all that stuff about enclosure movement and robber barons? You can multiply that today by a gazillion due to globalization. It's turned the entire world into one giant interconnected casino with all of those slot machines going to the handfuls of a few people, going into the pockets of a few people. I'm good at this thing. You want a good example of how globalization has led to resources moving out of hands and such? Why don't we talk about your phone? Specifically, I want to tell you about the cobalt in your phone. You want a new phone, you're scrolling while standing in the Tim Hortons line because it's camp day or something and you really want to help those kitties. But as you're staring at the shiny new phone specs, the ones that are barely discernible from the ones before, somewhere on the other side of the planet, there are kids mining cobalt in a hole in the ground while simultaneously fighting those tyrannids, the people devouring things. So organizations like Apple, Samsung, Google, all the usual suspects, use this cobalt, and almost all of it comes from one country, the Democratic Republic of Congo. And you'll be shocked to find out that cobalt miners are not somehow getting rich off of fueling everybody's Instagram addictions.
I am shocked. Shocked. Well, not that shocked.
Instead, they get literal pennies, while the aforementioned fuckers are raking in dough. The profits from the company arm dictators and rebel groups that ensure friendly policies, stop unionization, and keep things just the way that they are. That's the resource curse. It's a virus that infects countries like the DRC, which leave them perpetually destabilized, politically volatile, and utterly beholden to the whims of multinational monsters. It's very technically not colonization because there's no flags involved, I guess. But at the end of the day, Western companies are getting rich off of the exploitation of another land's labor and resources. So it's like colonization 2 with fewer pith helmets and more PowerPoint presentations and Zoom calls. You don't even have to get off the yacht this time. I'm just like, this is not even funny anymore. What's even the point? Right? Because right now, what the big thing is that we're hitting the end game of capitalism. Every country's being screwed. The entire planet's being turned into one giant exploitation factory run by the worst people that you can imagine. And I don't know what we do about it. How do you resist these guys? Well, there might actually be some way that we can make things a lot better for a few people. And that's why I'm excited about today's sponsor, Give Directly. And this isn't just me. A bunch of other Nebula creators are joining in because Give Directly has an incredible track record. They've been evaluated by groups like GiveWell and have delivered cash to over 1.6 million people in need across 15 countries, helping over 100,000 recipients across 10 districts. And look, I know what you're thinking. Oh, great. Another sponsorship spot. Click. But stick with me because this one is a little bit different and it connects directly to the topic that we have been discussing today. Remember how the economy is designed at its core to systematically take wealth from the poorest of the world and move it up into the pockets of 10 guys. Give Directly does the exact opposite. They take money from people who have it and send it directly to people who don't have it. You'd think that's what charities were supposed to be for. There are no middlemen, no complex schemes, just straight cash transfers to people who need it. This specific campaign, which several other Nebula creators and I are doing, is focused on giving aid to one particular village in Ankoria, a rural sublocation of the already rural Baringo County in western Kenya's Rift Valley region. So giving to this campaign isn't just helping an abstract person, but 164 real families, about 690 people who live in an area where most households depend on fishing from Lake Baringo just to survive. Many families there struggle to afford basic necessities like clean water and school fees for their children. Through this sponsorship, we can send each household about $850. That might sound like a good chunk of money, but not necessarily life-changing. But you must recall the immense power of currency conversion. In Kenya, $850 is in many cases equivalent to a year's income. And the Step Back audience is pretty smart, so you probably won't be surprised to find out that just giving money to people actually works, despite what some people whose entire personality is having read Rich Dad, Poor Dad will tell you. When researchers studied these cash transfers, they found something which should have been unsurprising, but they found remarkable. Direct cash transfers actually create positive ripple effects. People start businesses, they build better homes, and they send their kids to school. This money circulates in the local economy instead of being extracted from it. This is why it is so much better to straight up transfer wealth rather than, say, something like a microloan. Whatever money goes into the system stays in the system. Both research and listening to the recipients inform this entire plan. The money this campaign raises will be distributed in 3 installments because recipients have said that this is how they prefer to receive it. There will be no infantilization or telling people what they want, which is actually a thing I really respect. Also, while material aid is critical in emergencies, this is a way to tackle extreme poverty in a lasting way. By injecting cash where people desperately need it, we're providing immediate relief and empowering these families to make their own choices about improving their lives. Because who knows better about what these people need than themselves? If you want to join me and participate, I'm going to donate the AdSense of this video to it. Just head to givedirectly.org/stepback. I can't emphasize enough that every donation goes directly to the pockets of families in this specific village, and you'll actually get updates about how that money is being used and how it's improving the community. So that is what Nebula is doing this holiday season. We all know that we'll be spending the next few months bracing for the oncoming darkness. But this is a way, even if it's small, to do something tangible and transformative for these people. Your role in this, no matter how big or small, is invaluable. We'll be doing some real actual physical good for the world. And if we're beating back the darkness, one small way to do it is put a little light out there somewhere. All right, back to the video. I know this can seem really fucking bleak. Like, holy shit, Tristan, you basically spent at least, I don't know how much time, telling us that the world is burning and that the arsonists are throwing a party with the insurance money. And yeah, that's pretty much the situation that we're in. We're all just kind of living on borrowed time until what little we have also ends up in their bank accounts. At the end of the day, I think it's going to end with one person having all the money and everyone else being dead. And this, you know, these moments where you're just like, I'm just about to give up, holy shit, is why I think it's so important that we really need to hold on to hope. Even when it does feel like everything's going to shit. Even when billionaires are busy playing real-life hungry hippos with the global economy. Even when Golden Gate Capital have turned Red Lobster into economic chum, I still think there's hope. Because the moment that we give up is the moment that we let the bastards win. The moment we give up is when the game is truly over. And I refuse to let the Terminids win unless I'm playing the Terminids, in which case let me win. But because we have all the tools to free ourselves. We are down, but we're not out. So what do we actually do? Well, we're going to have to fight back, obviously, like those angry English peasants with their pitchforks. But we're also going to have something they didn't. The internet, knowledge, and each other. So we need to fight back, and we need to fight back hard. And this is usually the part where someone says to vote, but how you vote and who you vote for is between you and God and not a thing that I'm going to get in the middle of. What I am going to say is that that is the least important thing that you could be doing. The most important thing you could be doing is unionizing your workforce and supporting worker-owned co-ops that seem to be popping up all over the place. But most importantly, don't lose sight of hope. This system is designed to squeeze it out of you. And I know it sounds cheesy, but it's the only kryptonite we have to this just relentless bleakness. Because I don't want to let them win. Not on my watch, not on this low-budget YouTube channel. I would say that you should never count out a few people with big ideas and a lot of drive. That kind of thing can change the world. It's kind of one of the only things that ever has. Also, read Capital. So stay informed, stay angry, and join me next time as I find another abyss to gaze into and hope it doesn't gaze back. And if you want to support this channel, consider joining Nebula. You get ad-free content, you support this channel, and you get videos much earlier. So if this is your first time here, please check out my other videos where I am occasionally happier. Thank you, friends. Let's work together, and we actually can build a better future.